I used to think the scariest part of parenting was the early years, the sleepless nights, the fevers that came out of nowhere, the terrifying silence in the baby monitor. But no one warned me about this stage. No one tells you what it feels like when your daughter falls in love for the first time, and you don't like who she's loving. Her name is Sophie, 16 years old. Green eyes like her dad's, long brown hair she used to let me braid, and the kind of soft heart that feels everything too deeply. She still leaves little notes for me on the fridge, even though lately she's been rolling her eyes more than smiling. She told me about Ryan one afternoon like it was nothing, just a casual mention between bites of leftover pizza. There's this guy at school. His name's Ryan. We've been hanging out. Hanging out? Those two words opened a door I wasn't ready to walk through. I didn't say much at first. I didn't want to freak her out. I reminded myself that she needed space, that I should be grateful she even told me. I smiled and said, "That's nice, sweetie." But something inside me shifted. It wasn't just because she had a boyfriend. It was how her body changed when she said his name, how her eyes darted away when I asked if he was kind, how she brushed off every question with a quick, "Mom, it's fine. He's nice. Nice." A word too small to hide behind. A few days later, she asked if he could come over. "Just for an hour," she said. "He wants to meet you." I agreed. Of course. That's what good moms do. We smile and play along even when our stomachs are tight and our instincts are loud. Ryan walked into our house with sneakers half-tied and an attitude that came in before he did. He was polite, technically. He said hi and shook my hand, but he didn't look me in the eye. Not once. He barely spoke, sat on the edge of the couch like it was an inconvenience. And Sophie? She laughed too loudly. She stared at him like he held some secret only she was allowed to know. I didn't say anything that day. I just watched. That became my habit. Watching. I watched her come home later than usual with stories that didn't add up. I watched her post less online, stop texting her old friends, stop painting, something she'd always done when she was happy. I watched her go quiet whenever I mentioned his name. Then I started hearing things. A friend of mine, another mom, mentioned seeing Sophie and Ryan at the mall. "He didn't seem very nice," she said. "Kind of cold, dismissive, but maybe he was just having a bad day." I nodded, smiled, thanked her, but the knot in my chest grew tighter. The worst part was the change in Sophie. It was like she was shrinking, dimmer, not sad exactly, but dulled, like she was carrying something heavy I couldn't see. I tried to ask. Once, while we were folding laundry, I said, "You've seemed a little off lately. Everything okay?" She shrugged. "Just tired." When I pushed, even gently, she snapped. "Mom, I'm not 5. Stop treating me like I'm broken." I bit my tongue, let it go, but I couldn't stop thinking. That night, I lay in bed and thought about all the times I'd warned her about strangers, about crossing the street, about eating enough vegetables. I taught her to look both ways, to say please and thank you, to never talk to someone who made her uncomfortable. But I hadn't prepared her for this. I hadn't prepared her for someone who made her doubt her own light, and I didn't know what to do. If I pushed too hard, she'd shut me out. If I did nothing, I'd be complicit in her pain. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the right kind of mother would do. The brave kind, the wise kind, the kind of mother I used to think I'd be by the time she was a teenager. Turns out, none of us are ever really ready. But before we dive into this thrilling story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit like, so that YouTube can show you more content like this. The next morning, I made pancakes, the kind with chocolate chips shaped into a smiley face. It used to be our Saturday thing. When Sophie was little, she'd sit on the kitchen counter swinging her legs, watching the batter sizzle, always insisting on extra syrup. She'd talk about everything, her dreams, her friends, what she wanted to be when she grew up. That Saturday, she barely touched the pancakes. She said she wasn't hungry. She scrolled on her phone instead. I sat across from her, watching the light from the window hit her face in that quiet, golden way it used to when she was 5. But now, she barely looked up. I said, "Ryan hasn't been around lately." She shrugged. "He's been busy." I didn't press. Not yet. Instead, I said, "You know, you can talk to me about anything, right?" She gave me a tight smile. "I know, Mom. But the thing is, knowing and believing are not the same." That afternoon, I cleaned her room while she was out. Not snooping. At least that's what I told myself. just tidying like I used to. The floor was a mess, clothes everywhere, empty cans of soda on her nightstand. I found her old sketchbook under the bed, covered in dust. The last drawing was dated 2 months ago. A girl with a cracked mask. Half her face was hidden. The eyes were hers. I sat on her bed holding it in my lap, trying not to read too much into it, and failing completely. I remembered something from a podcast I'd listened to a while back. A psychologist said teenage girls often internalize emotional neglect, not just from parents, but from peers and partners, that they'll excuse cruelty to maintain connection, that they sometimes lose themselves in the idea of being loved, even if that love comes with silence and control. I hated that my daughter might be one of them. That night, she came home later than usual. Her hair was messy, eyes puffy. "Were you crying?" I asked. She looked at me, just for a second, and then away. "No, I'm just tired." I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, my voice soft. "Did something happen with Ryan?" Sophie stared at the floor. "Can we not do this right now?" It wasn't anger. It wasn't even defiance. It was exhaustion. And that scared me more than anything. She went upstairs without waiting for me to answer. I stood there, frozen, like I'd missed an off-ramp I couldn't circle back to. Later that night, I texted my best friend, Lisa. She has a daughter a year older than Sophie. Me. She won't talk to me. I think something's wrong. Lisa, do you think he's hurting her? Me. Not physically, but emotionally. Maybe. I don't know. I feel like I'm losing her. Lisa, then don't push. Just stay close. Make her feel safe. Let her know she has a soft place to land. That stuck with me. A soft place to land. I thought I had built that. I thought I was that. But maybe I'd been too busy offering advice, giving warnings, trying to steer her away from pain instead of being someone who could hold it with her. The next day, I left a note on her pillow. No pressure, no lectures, just this. I see you. I love you. I'm here when you're ready. She didn't say anything about it. Not that day, not the next. But the note disappeared from the pillow and wasn't in the trash. And that, somehow, was enough for now. Because I knew this wasn't going to be fixed overnight. This wasn't a scraped knee or a forgotten homework assignment. This was the beginning of something bigger. A reckoning between the girl I raised and the young woman she was becoming. And I needed to be ready to meet her there, wherever that was. The next morning, I watched Sophie slip out the door with barely a glance in my direction. My chest tightened as the front door clicked shut. Every mom's internal alarm blared. Watchful mode activated. I made a solemn vow over my lukewarm coffee. Today, I would bridge the gap without pushing her away. I stationed myself at the kitchen counter and pretended to scroll recipes. But really, I was rehearsing my opening line. Developmental psychology tells us teenagers oscillate between craving autonomy and yearning for connection. The trick is catching them in that vulnerable middle ground. I decided on gentle curiosity rather than interrogation. When Sophie reappeared after school, her shoulders were slumped, and her backpack straps hung unevenly, tiny clues to her emotional load. I greeted her with an exaggerated flourish. Behold, the world's worst chef has made grilled cheese and tomato soup, because your immune system obviously thinks college is around the corner. Her lips twitched. That was my opening. She sat, accepting the plate. I sat opposite, spoon poised. "You've been awfully quiet lately. Everything all right in World S?" I nodded toward the S for Sophie. She rolled her eyes but smiled just a bit. I remembered a technique from a parenting podcast. Use humor to lower defenses. So I launched into a self-deprecating story about how I once tried to impress her dad with a gourmet meal that resulted in a smoke detector symphony. Sophie laughed, genuine laughter that filled the kitchen. Finding my moment, I leaned forward, voice soft. "I noticed you've been spending less time painting." She'd always sketched, her art a window into her feelings. "Your sketchbook's gathering dust, and that worries me." Her gaze flicked to the window, avoiding mine. "I'm just busy," I nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words while holding space for more. "Busy is okay. Just remember, art can be a way to unload stuff you can't say out loud." She picked at her soup, stirring in circles. "I know." In that silence, the afternoon light softened her features and my worry. I silently vowed, no ultimatums, just patience, presence, and enough chocolate chips in her pancakes to remind her that home is a safe place. Always. That evening, I prepared for what I dubbed Operation Movie Night. Classic, low stakes, and nostalgic. I cleaned up, dimmed the lights, and popped popcorn in the old-fashioned stovetop popper, letting the buttery aroma fill the living room. I cued The Princess Bride on the TV and arranged blankets and pillows into a cozy nest. I texted Sophie, no phones for 2 hours. Movie, snacks, me. She replied with a single K, which, in teenager speak, could mean anything from counting the seconds until I delete this to, heck yeah. I chose optimism. Sophie padded in wearing her dad's oversized hoodie. She hesitated at the threshold, scanning the scene as if deciding whether to cross some invisible line. I offered her a blanket with a triumphant smile. She accepted it and slid onto the couch. Mid-movie, when Inigo Montoya's face twisted into that perfect hello expression, I nudged her gently. Remember when you used to quote every line? She chuckled, quoting along, and at that moment, she was 15 again, effortlessly connected to me. At intermission, I passed her the popcorn bowl. She grabbed a handful inside, the way you do when you feel safe enough to exhale. I said, I missed this. She looked at me, eyes shining. Me too, she whispered. Afterward, I turned off the TV and flicked on a lamp with a warm glow. Movie nights are important, I declared, because science says shared rituals build trust. Sophie rolled her eyes, but her smile was real. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I felt the knot in my chest loosen. Before she went to bed, she paused in the hallway. Thanks for tonight, she mumbled. I pressed a kiss to her temple. Anytime, kiddo. Always. The following morning, I found Sophie at the breakfast nook, almond butter toast half eaten, her sketchbook open beside her phone. She looked up, pale light from the window accentuating the dark circles under her eyes. I felt a pang. Teenage girls need roughly 9 hours of sleep, but get half that sometimes. I sat across and said, I noticed you penciled in some sketches last night. Her eyes flicked to the drawings, delicate lines forming a bird trapped in a cage. My heart ached for the symbolism. That's beautiful. She looked away, just doodling. I nodded, resisting my instinct to demand explanations. You know, journaling and sketching help teens process big emotions. Fear, excitement, confusion. I tapped the sketchbook. If you ever want to talk through what you're drawing, I'm here. Her expression softened. Thanks, Mom. She took a deep breath, and for a brief moment, I sensed her gratitude battling her teenage impulse to close off. Later that day, I resisted the urge to text her about lunch. I reminded myself of what I'd read. Hovering only pushes teens further away. Instead, I sent her a single emoji, a butterfly, to symbolize freedom and transformation. She replied with a heart. Friday arrived like an electric storm, gray clouds gathering in the sky and in my chest at once. I woke before dawn to the familiar ache of maternal worry, a heaviness that pulsed behind my ribs whenever Sophie seemed off balance. After a quick shower, I lingered under the warm spray, steeling myself for whatever the day might bring. By mid-afternoon, Sophie shuffled in from school, her usual springy step replaced by a slow, flat-footed trudge. She dropped her backpack by the hall bench and avoided my eyes as I called out, Hey, sunshine, how was day? Her shoulders tightened, and she mumbled, Fine, before slipping upstairs. I felt the knot in my gut tighten. Fine was her armor, too small a word to cover the turmoil brewing beneath. I debated texting her, I love you. Dinner will be early. I'm here if you need me. But paused, remembering that hovering pushes teenagers away. Instead, I poured myself a cup of tea and let the silence settle. An hour later, I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for dinner when faint raised voices drifted down the stairs. I froze, knife poised above the cutting board. It was that low, urgent murmur. Ryan's voice, slightly irritated, then Sophie, tense and tremulous. My heart started pounding, echoing in my ears like a warning drum. I set down the knife, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and exhaled in a slow, deliberate breath, my own attempt at co-regulation. I needed calm so I could be her anchor. Quietly, I stepped toward her bedroom door, thickness of the wood muting the sound. A muffled exchange. Ryan, distant, clipped. Stop posting that picture. It's embarrassing. Sophie, voice tight. I'm not deleting anything. It's my photo. My chest constricted. Embarrassment, control disguised as concern. I recognized the manipulation tactics, isolating her from her own voice, eroding her confidence one demand at a time. My maternal instincts bristled. I knocked softly. "Sophie?" Silence. Then her shaky, "Come in." I pushed the door open a sliver and slipped inside. Sophie sat on the edge of her unmade bed, knees drawn to her chin, eyes red-rimmed in the fading afternoon light. Ryan stood awkwardly near the desk, phone clutched like a weapon. He glanced at me, discomfort flickering across his face. "Hey," I said, voice calm but firm. "I'm just checking on my daughter." Ryan's shoulders hunched. Without a word, he turned and left, the door closing with a muted click. I crossed the room and sat beside Sophie, my hand brushing hers. She flinched, then allowed me to hold her, her warmth seeping into me. She began to tremble, tears spilling free. I wrapped my arms around her, breathing softly. "I'm here. You're safe." She sobbed against my shoulder, and for a moment, I let her grief wash over me. I thought of the science I'd read. When teens are overwhelmed by emotion, a parent's steady presence is more powerful than any advice. So I held her, matching my breaths to hers, letting her anger, sadness, and fear find release. After several minutes, her sobs slowed, and she pulled back just enough to meet my gaze. "I'm so stupid," she whispered, voice cracking. Why did I let him say that? Why didn't I just delete it? I brushed a lock of hair from her face. "Sweetheart, you're not stupid. You have a beautiful voice, both online and off." He was trying to silence it because he's insecure. That says more about him than it does about you. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I saw a flicker of understanding. I thought, if he asked, it was because he cared. I shook my head gently. Caring never demands you lose yourself. Love lifts you up. It doesn't clip your wings. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. I felt her tears dampen my sweatshirt. "I hate that I ever let him hurt me like that," she murmured. I kissed the top of her head. "I know, but you'll heal. Every mistake, every heartbreak, teaches you how strong you are, and I'll be here for every step." We stayed that way until the sun dipped below the horizon. The room grew dim, but I kept the lamp on beside us, a small beacon of warmth in the darkness. Finally, Sophie pulled away and let out a shaky breath. "Mom, I'm sorry you had to see me like that." I gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "You didn't have to go through it alone." She managed a small, tired smile. "Thank you for not freaking out." I laughed softly. "I freak out in my head. Out loud, I'm mission control." She snorted, a real wholehearted sound. Best mission control ever. That night, as I tucked her in, she whispered, "I feel lighter." I pressed my forehead to hers. "Me too." Walking back to my room, I realized this moment, raw, painful, and beautiful, would be one of the defining memories of her adolescence. Because sometimes the bravest thing a mother can do is to step back, let her child stumble, then stand vigil at her side while she finds the courage to rise again. Saturday morning dawned golden and still, as if the world were giving us a moment's grace. I tiptoed into the kitchen long before Sophie stirred, determined to reclaim our pancake ritual. I sifted flour, mashed ripe bananas, and watched fresh blueberries tumble into the batter like little promises of renewal. The warm, sweet aroma swirled through the air, waking memories of Sophie at 5, perched on the counter, legs swinging, cheeks flushed with excitement. When she finally appeared, hair mussed from sleep, eyes soft yet wary, I greeted her with a bright, "Good morning, sunshine." She hesitated at the threshold, taking in the spread of pancakes stacked high, the syrup glistening like amber jewels. For a moment, I saw the old sparkle in her gaze, that childlike wonder I feared was dimming. She slid onto a stool, and I placed a plate before her. As she cut into the fluffy stack, I watched her inhale the first bite, eyes closing in bliss. "Better than school cafeteria, right?" I teased. She cracked a small smile. "Definitely." I poured us 2 mugs of cocoa with extra marshmallows and sat down across from her. The kitchen was bathed in morning light, dust motes dancing like fairies. I took a breath, careful to keep my tone light but sincere. "Sophie, yesterday was hard. I'm proud of how you handled it." Her fork paused. Blueberry sauce smeared at the corner of her mouth. She met my gaze, vulnerability flickering behind her green eyes. "Thanks," she said softly, tracing a circle on the table. I leaned in, voice low. It takes courage to set boundaries, especially when you still care. Psychology tells us that asserting and owning your worth is a key step in building self-esteem. I reached across and brushed a crumb from her cheek. "You did that." Her lips trembled, and she swallowed. I was scared. I didn't want to hurt his feelings. "You're allowed to protect your heart," I said, nodding. "Healthy love doesn't demand silence or shame. It celebrates your light, not dims it." She looked at her hands, then back at me. I realized I was shrinking to fit into his world, instead of inviting him into mine. Her voice cracked on the last word, and tears glistened at the edges of her lashes. I swallowed against my own emotion. "That's profound, sweetheart. Most adults never learn that." I squeezed her hand. "I wish I could have told you sooner, but I learned by falling too." She swallowed a sob, then breathed it out with a shaky laugh. "Mom, you falling would have made my first heartbreak feel less like a betrayal." My chest constricted at the raw honesty in her words. I swallowed again. "I'm sorry I wasn't there in time, but I'm here now, and I won't leave." We sat in silence for a moment, punctuated only by the gentle clink of mugs and the distant hum of life outside. Then Sophie surprised me. She reached under the table and pulled out her sketchbook. On the blank page, she drew a small silhouette of a girl standing tall, surrounded by a glowing aura. "This is me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. I traced the drawing with my finger. "And this is your truth." Strong and bright. She met my eyes and said, "I want to remember this feeling, knowing I have my own back, and yours." Tears pricked my eyes. "Always," I whispered. After breakfast, we carried our things to the living room and spent the morning painting. Her on canvas, me in my journal, laughing at paint splatters and trading stories about awkward first dates from our own teen years. Each anecdote ended in giggles, each brushstroke a balm. I could feel our bond knitting itself stronger, stitch by stitch. Later, as the sun dipped low, I walked her to her bedroom door. She hugged me fiercely, pressing her face into my sweatshirt. "Thank you for believing in me," she said. I kissed the top of her head. "Belief is just the beginning. I know you'll soar." She pulled back to look at me, eyes bright. "Watch me," and I promised myself I would. Watch her, support her, and cheer her on as she discovered her own wings, confident that even when storms come, she'll remember this morning, the taste of blueberry pancakes, the warmth of honest words, and the unbreakable safety net of my love. Sunday unfolded like a quiet promise, soft sunlight filtering through the curtains, birds tracing invisible paths across the sky, and in my heart, a gentle anticipation. After a week of turbulence, I yearned for something steady, something that would remind Sophie and me of how far we'd come. I padded downstairs in my slippers to find Sophie already at the kitchen table, sketchbook open, a cup of herbal tea cooling beside her. Her posture was relaxed, shoulders back, chin lifted, an emblem of the inner strength she'd reclaimed. Seeing her there, serene in the morning glow, filled me with a mixture of relief and pride so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. I set 2 plates of French toast before us, each slice dusted with cinnamon and sugar, drizzled with maple syrup. As she bit into the warm, sweet comfort food, I watched her eyes close in contentment. A simple gesture but one that spoke volumes. "Feeling good today?" I ventured, pouring myself a cup of coffee. She looked up, eyes clear and bright, and smiled, "Better than I have all week." I sat down across from her, fingers wrapped around my mug. "I was thinking," I began, voice soft, "about how you told Ryan it was over." Her eyes flickered with that moment's memory, equal parts resolve and vulnerability. "Yeah," she said, tracing the rim of her plate. "It was harder than I thought. I'd rehearsed what to say 100 times, but when I saw his hurt look, my throat closed up." I reached across, placing my hand over hers. "I know. I remember." I gave her fingers a gentle squeeze. "But you did it. You honored your worth even when it was painful." Her gaze drifted to the window, where a breeze played with the curtains. "I felt like I was betraying him," she admitted, voice trembling. "He'd been my whole world for weeks. Breaking up felt like ripping out my own heart." My heart clenched at her confession. Breakups are grieving a future you'd imagined, I explained, drawing on the psychology I'd been reading. You love the idea of us, the memories you thought you'd make. It's okay to mourn that. She nodded, tears glinting. I keep replaying our last conversation in my head. She paused, inhaling a shaky breath. He said, "I thought you were mine." And I said, "No one owns anyone." It felt right, but it hurt to say. I brushed a tear from her cheek. It was the truest thing you could say. Love is freedom, not possession. I offered a tender smile. And honesty, even when it hurts, is the foundation of every healthy relationship. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. Thank you for teaching me that. We sat in that embrace for a long moment, the hum of the morning enveloping us. Then Sophie pulled back and reached for her sketchbook, flipping to a blank page. With focused strokes, she drew two figures standing apart but reaching out to each other. One figure bathed in light, the other shadowed, edges blurred. Underneath, she wrote, "Growth through letting go." I read the words aloud and felt a lump in my throat. "That's beautiful, Sophie." She closed the sketchbook and met my eyes. "I drew it for both of us." My breath caught. "For both of us." She nodded. "You had to let me find my own strength. I had to let go of what I thought I wanted so I could become who I'm meant to be." I reached across the table and held her hands. "And I had to let go of my fears. Trust you to navigate your own heart." Tears brimmed in both our eyes, but they were the kind that healed rather than hurt. We sat there, mother and daughter, two souls entwined by love's complexities, protective instinct and the courage to step back, worry and faith interwoven. Later, we spent the afternoon walking through the neighborhood, spontaneous laughter punctuating our conversation about everything and nothing, her plans for the week, my upcoming work deadline, a stray dog chasing butterflies in the park. I watched her interact with the world, confident, kind, whole, and felt a swell of joy so profound, it felt like it might burst from my chest. That evening, as the sky blushed pink with sunset, we settled on the back porch with mugs of hot cocoa. Sophie leaned her head against my shoulder. "I never want to forget this weekend," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "Neither will I." She closed her eyes, and I took a moment to etch the scene into my memory. The soft glow of the porch light, the warmth of her against me, the steady rhythm of her breathing. This was our victory. The landscape after the storm, where healing blossoms in the open air. Before bed, Sophie left a small envelope on my pillow. Inside was a watercolor of a phoenix rising from embers. Underneath, scrawled in her elegant hand, was a single word: resilience. I pressed it to my heart, gratitude and love flooding through me. In that moment, I knew our journey had transformed us both. She'd learned to honor her worth and set boundaries. I'd learned to trust her resilience and release my fears. As I drifted to sleep, I whispered into the quiet, "Well done, my brave girl. Well done." If you enjoyed the story, give it a like and subscribe to the channel to support us. We'd also love it if you left a comment telling us which city you're listening from and whether you identified with this mother in any way. Have you ever gone through something similar to this story? If you can, share it with another mother who might be needing this dose of affection and hope. You are very important to us, and we thank you for being part of this community of reflection and love. Thank you so much, and see you next time.